The story begins with a boy named Jae-hyun Shin. Jae-hyun says to himself, "As usual, I was returning home through a crowded street. Suddenly, everything went dark. Then I started seeing numbers, like I was in some Matrix movie. Everyone walking around me had numbers floating above their heads, and I had no idea what those numbers meant. As I kept walking, I thought maybe it was just my imagination. A few more days passed, but as the days went on, I started seeing even more numbers. Could it be that these are countdowns of these people's lives? Then the next day, I saw a bodybuilder in the subway. He also had a number above his head. Then I thought, could this be their fighting ability?" Jae-hyun talks to himself. What could these be? What are these numbers, really? Am I losing my mind? Why didn't this strange power come with any instructions? Ugh, this will drive me crazy. Then I decided to ignore these numbers. But I didn't even need to do that, because reality hit me like a truck. When I got home, I saw my older brother standing there, wearing a shoulder bag and also holding a handbag, and our mother was crying on the floor. Mother cried and said, "Forgive me, Uhaeon." I was shocked and said to my mother, "Mom, what is happening?" Then I looked toward my brother. "Big brother, what are you doing?" Mother was still sitting on the ground crying. Mother cried again and said, "I'm very ashamed that I'm a worthless mother." Uhaeon said angrily, "I hate that I was born into this family. Don't ever come in my way again." As Uhaeon opened the door, I tried to call out, "Uhaeon," but he didn't listen and slammed the door and left. I went to my mother and started to console her. After that, my life was nothing short of hell, constantly thinking about those numbers that only I could see. After that, I did everything I could. For myself, for my mother. I worked as long as I had strength. I was in the barracks when the commander came and said, "Lights out, soldier." I quickly replied, "Sir, yes, sir." I thought my life could change if I learned something, anything. So I tried to learn everything I had a chance to. Eventually, the hard work paid off and I got a job in the General Affairs Department at a reputed company. Now it felt like life would improve, but I didn't know this was the beginning of my terrifying times. One day at the office, my female coworker came to me and said, "Hey, Jae-hyun, will you stay overnight to work?" My eyes were on the computer screen. Actually, the work is already done. Female coworker smiled and said, "Then, will you come for a drink with me? You like stout beer, right?" I continued working and said, "Thanks, but I'm checking the asset books." Female coworker, surprised, said, "Asset books?" The next day, when that female coworker told a male coworker, he said, "Told you it's no use. Poor guy. It's not like he'll get any reward for working this hard." Male coworker smiled and said, "But today you're in luck. I also like stout beer." Female coworker coldly replied, "Who asked you?" I was busy with work when my eyes landed on some numbers on the screen. Did I make a mistake in the calculation? When I understood the matter, I was shocked. What? We're this far behind on tax payments? Then, as I looked at the total, I remembered, this number, I've seen it somewhere. I went toward the boss's office. Boss? Boss was eating a sandwich and said, "Hey, you're still here?" I gathered courage and said, "I was checking the books, and it seems we missed some tax payments, and this has been happening since last year." Boss was absorbed in eating his sandwich. "Oh, that? Ignore it." I tried to explain again. "Sir, but this is tax evasion. It's illegal." Boss said angrily. "Jae-hyun Shin, didn't I say? Drop the matter." Boss slammed his hand on the table. "Again," he said angrily. "Did you not hear me?" I said it's fine. At that moment, suddenly numbers started spinning in my head and suddenly a name came to my mind. Senior Vice President Hyo Jong-jeon. Jae-hyun thinks to himself, now I remember the number floating above his head was also more than 100 million, and the amount owed in the books is the same as the number shown above John's head. But he seemed like a good person and interacted well with everyone. But in reality, he collected such a large amount. Wait a minute, could these numbers mean what I'm thinking? I tried to explain again. Sir, if someone finds out about this, things will go very badly. Boss said again. Look, Jae-hyun, can you just loosen up a bit? You try to stay straight like an arrow, but that will break you. I still stood firm. Sir? Boss looked at his sandwich and said, you need to learn to bend if you want to live in this world. Are you listening to me? That night, as I sat on my bed, I realized I was standing at a crossroads in my life. If I stay silent, nothing will happen. I can ignore this matter like everyone else and just continue doing my job. But then I'll live my whole life as a failure. A failure who puts food on the table after setting aside his skills and morals. At that moment, I made up my mind and dialed a number. Hello. The next day in the office, the whole staff was whispering. Police were taking away the senior VP. One male colleague whispered, Hey, isn't that senior VP John? Another male colleague said, he's been arrested for embezzlement. Another said, he reportedly collected a lot of money. The first one said, wow, he didn't seem like that kind of person. Jae-hyun speaks in his mind. John returned all the money he had taken. Then I saw that the number above his head disappeared. I was shocked. What? Can this be real? Could these numbers really represent what I think they do? Tax evasion? What kind of power is this? Then I saw the senior VP look at me with an evil grin. Huh? What does that mean now? The next moment, my boss called me into his office. Boss was busy with his work. Sorry, Jae-hyun, but an order has come from above. Clear your desk before the end of the week. Boss smiled and said, didn't want to say it, but I told you so. As I walked out of the office and started clearing my desk, a colleague said, "Oh, this is the guy who ratted out the senior VP. How can we trust a guy like this? He doesn't even understand what teamwork means." A senior officer said, "Jae-hyun Shin. Oh, you're that whistleblower. Sorry, but looks like you're not right for our company." Another officer said, "Don't you know how tight-knit this industry is?" The first senior officer said, "He'll name anyone who doesn't follow the books. A person should know how to compromise. Don't you understand?" As I left the office and picked up my bag, everyone behind me started yelling, "Traitor!" The price of being a whistleblower turned out to be too high for me, but maybe I don't even regret it. Now I just need to find a new job. But now I know what these numbers mean. There's something else that fills me with anger. This world is full of people like them. The government has no money because of thieves like these, but now my path is clear. As if a sword has come into my hands one by one, I started collecting taxes. I made up my mind. I will become a civil servant. I will erase those numbers above everyone's heads. You useless thieves. You will return every single penny. The next day, I went to the office of a crook and showed him his collection slip and said, "I've come to collect taxes. Hope you don't mind." Jae-hyun's thoughts. The world isn't fair. This fact amplifies competitiveness and innovation. The fact that there are very few things in the world that are really fair. For example, the law, gravity, and taxes. Odd as it may sound, but one day I found out I had a special power, and that power is the ability to see how much taxes a person has evaded. Though they all look like they have sufficient money to buy clothes and expensive cars, they just don't want to pay taxes. The people complain saying, "My paycheck stays the same, but my tax rates keep climbing," or "I have it as hard as anyone else," Jae-hyun says in his mind. But what I don't understand is, what makes you think you are above the law? I still don't know how I got this power, but now that I know what it means, I've made it my personal mission and will put all of you evaders in prison. And I am Jae-hyun Shin, the tax reaper. I was sitting in the examination hall, and the only sound I could hear was the tick-tock of my wristwatch. Why was I sitting in an examination hall? Well, today was the round 1 of the written exam for grade 7 civil servant, tax inspection. Jae-hyun says in his mind, "Whew, none of the questions caused me any trouble." Just then the hall supervisor called out, "Please place your hands under your desks. Anyone that moves their pen from this point on will be disqualified." As I came out of the examination hall, I began to speak to myself again. Let's compare my answers to others. I spoke as I was looking at my phone. I saw 16 missed calls from an unknown number on my phone screen. Seeing the missed call, I said, "Who would call me this many times?" Then I saw I got a text message from the number as well. When I opened the text, I was shocked as it was from the Seoul Central Hospital emergency telling me, "Your mom, Myungja Lee, has been brought into the ER, and you were asked to come over." On seeing the text, I freaked out and said, "What? You can't be serious." I ran like my tail was on fire as I spoke in my mind. "Mom's in the emergency room." As I made sure Mom was all right in her room, I went to the reception to check how much the bill was. The receptionist took a look at her computer screen and told me, "Your total comes out to 650,700. She didn't even look up as she asked me, "How many installments would you like it to be?" I also replied, 6 months, please." As I held the bill in my hand, my head kind of spinned. As I said in my mind, "This is a lot of money. I can't pay this. What do I do?" Then I took a deep breath as I had to go get my mother so we could go back home. As I came over to my mom, I took care of the bill, "Mom. Let's go." My mom looked up to me and asked, "How much was it?" I replied in a casual tone, "It was much less than I expected. Don't worry about it." Mom didn't buy it. "Okay, so how much was it?" I tried to dodge her question again. "A few $100,000. I don't know, let's just go." We stopped by the ATM machine and Mom asked, "So, how did the test go?" As we were going back, I replied, "Not bad, I guess." Mom asks worried, "Not bad. Does that mean you're gonna pass or not?" As I opened the door, "Pass, I think. I checked the problems online and it looks like my score will be pretty good." Mom smiles as she says, "That's great. That's my son." As I was opening a mail we received, "But there's still the interview stage, so it's not over yet." As I read the letter, I said in my mind, "Where's this from? The Health Insurance Corporation?" According to the notice, our health insurance was terminated because 6 or more installments were not paid, and now all patients under the insurance will have to bear full medical expenses. I was dumbstruck as I said in my mind, "Is our health insurance being terminated because we haven't been able to pay our taxes? But Mom needs her meds." Just then Mom said, "You know interviews are all about spirit, right?" I wasn't listening as my mind was elsewhere. I have to at least pay the insurance premiums for Mom. I sighed. "And that's on top of the hospital bills from today." Mom saw me holding the notice and said, "What are you looking at?" Not wanting her to worry, I hid the notice behind me. "Nothing. Just some bill. I'll pay it. Don't worry." Mom looked skeptical as she came over and said, "A bill? Let me see it." I began to worry as I said, "It's nothing. It's just the gas bill." Still not buying my words, Mom pulls the notice from my hand as she says, "What? Why would you hide the gas bill? You give me that right now. I tried to stop her. Come on, Mom. Don't worry about it. I try saying in a calm tone. I told it's nothing. Mom's still skeptical. Hold on now. Let me see. She's out of words for a few seconds. Then she puts the notice down and says, I'll take care of this. You forget about it. I was confused as I asked, what are you saying, Mom? Where are you going to get the money? You're barely getting by with the help of your meds. A little shocked considering her health. You're not thinking of working, Mom said in a calm, affirmative tone. I said I'll take care of it. Don't make me repeat myself. I try to relieve her. Mom, I'll just get a job. Mom gets angry and says, Jaehyun Shin, have you lost your mind? I tried to explain. Well, what do you want me to do? We have to pay the bills. Mom says, explaining. You've come this far in the civil servant exams. You can't give up now. Don't worry about your mother. I get frantic as I say, how can I not worry about you? Mom began to cry as she said, Jaehyun, I just don't want to do this to you too, okay? Not after your father and your brother. She says in a firm tone, I swore I'd never drag my children down again. I'm still healthy as a horse, so you forget about this and prepare for your interview, you hear me? She began to shiver. Money. It's always money. After things calmed down, I was in my room as I saw my phone and said to myself, I told Mom that I'd get ready for my interview, but there was no way I could do that. Instead, I made a call. As I dialed my brother's number and saw it on my screen, I said to myself, I thought I'd never call this number again. But I was desperate enough to call the Ahi big brother that abandoned his own family. Uhaeon online. Didn't I tell you not to call me again? I tried to say, Uhaeon, Mom's really sick. All he could say was, I'm in the middle of a meeting. Bye. I quickly added, wait, it's really serious this time. I was amazed when he said, when has that woman not been sick? What, is she on her deathbed this time? His last line was, text me the details of the funeral. Bye. I was so angry, I yelled into the phone, you son of a bia! He still amazed me. Would you stop whining? She's not even dead yet. I yelled at him. I don't care how you feel about us. You can't do this to Mom. He says in a mocking tone, wow, Mom couldn't have asked for a more loyal son. So, why don't you just take care of her? She's your responsibility now. I yelled back, no, Mom's our responsibility, you dirtbag. Then Uhaeon says in a calculative tone, so what do you want from me? Oh, I get it. You're begging, aren't you? I was shocked. What? He mocked as he said, you're really shameless. You know that? You're just using Mom as an excuse to ask for cash, right? I yelled back, what the hell are you saying, you batard? All Uhaeon could say was, call me all the names you want. We're not family anymore, right? Which also means I have no obligation to give you or that woman a single penny. He continued mocking me. If I help you once, you'll come back and drag me down again. Don't call me again. He disconnected the call after that. I called out into the phone. Hey, don't hang up on me. You son. Even though the call was disconnected, I still yelled out, you son of a bitch. Later that day, I went to the beach to sort my mind out. I saw the people around me chit-chatting and going about their own work. Seeing everything that happened, therefore I swore to always pursue transparency and diversity in my line of duty. For me, transparency means to foster trust in the government. Diversity means ensuring that everyone's voice is heard and making progress. As I was speaking to myself, you want to know how I overcome hardships? You mean not being able to make it to a job interview because my mother is sick, even though it's the final step in landing my dream job? Or being such a loser that you can't pay for your mother's meds? You mean overcoming that kind of hardship, right? Okay, I was drunk. It's easy. The answer is death, you A. To live like others, I had to live differently from them. When everyone was out drinking and having fun, I studied. When they were having the time of their lives, I worked. I fell and my eyeglasses broke. But once a beggar, always a beggar, right? I got angry at myself as I said, screw being a civil servant. It's all meaningless. From rags to riches, all it takes is effort, huh? I said in my mind. Yeah, right. All it takes is for me to fall to my death. I got onto the railing of the bridge and looked into the river flowing below me. I gulped in and was almost going to jump but fell back onto the ground. Then I scolded myself, stupid coward. I'm the worst coward I know. I don't even have the courage to die. As I looked at my books falling out of my bag, I thought if I tried hard enough things would change, but it's all a damn joke. I got angry and was about to throw my book, then said to myself, should someone hoping to become a civil servant really be throwing trash into the Han River? Suddenly someone grabbed my hand. The man's voice says, it looks like you're getting ready for an interview. Why would you give up after passing the written portion? As he looked at me. Let's hear your story? Jaehyun's inner thoughts. I was standing on the bridge when I met a man who saved me and asked to hear my story. I got annoyed by the man and told him, what's it to you? Leave me alone. The man says a little taken aback, hey now, no need to get worked up. Why don't you humor me and state my curiosity? I was shocked as I said, what? The man picks up a book and says, holding it, judging by this book, it looks like you're studying taxes. Were you about to give up? Taking the book back, I said, no, not yet. Handing the book back, the man says, so you were just venting some anger. As I looked at him, I said in my mind, who is this man? I don't think we met tonight by chance. He shows up out of nowhere wearing a luxury suit and watch. He still says in a calm tone, "Why don't you tell me what's got you so upset?" My eyes were fixed on him as I said in my mind, "What does a loaded guy like him want from me?" Then my eyes focus on him, and something comes to my mind. I bet he's got a lot of dirty money to his name too, right? I focus on the top of his head to see the number, and get shocked. What? His head was empty as I said in my mind, "He hasn't committed tax fraud? Really?" Suddenly, the man was about to turn around as he said, "If you don't want to talk, I'll be on my way." I tried to speak up. I didn't know if I was telling him or to myself. I was just doing everything I could. I was just trying to live a normal life. Frustrated at myself, I say, "But something always goes wrong. It's not fair. It's like I'm cursed." The man says, "Whoa, whoa. Take a deep breath. What do you think is so unfair?" I was still frustrated. Everything. Nothing ever goes right. Looking up into the sky, I never asked for much. I just wanted to live an average life like everyone else. So I spent my 20s working myself to the bone. My body began to tremble. I need to escape this hell. It seemed like a flashback as I continued speaking. I just wanted a life like any other, with the normal ups and downs. I wanted to be rewarded fairly for the amount of work I put in. That's all, the man said in a calm tone. "And that's why you believe the world is not unfair?" If so, I have to say I'm a little disappointed. Again, as I spoke, I didn't know if I was speaking to him or telling to myself. I know what it sounds like. Sure, it could be worse. But still, considering how unfair the world is, was it such a serious crime to report a crook for embezzlement? The man put a finger to the corner of his mouth and said, Embezzlement? I continued. I don't pretend I'm better than anyone else. I just wanted to live life with a clean conscience. I began to cry as I said, "So, I reported our senior VP for embezzlement. Then I got fired." Coming out of my slumping mood. "But whatever. It's my fault for being born with shit luck, right?" I griped my shirt and said in an angry tone, "Does anyone believe the law brings justice to this world?" The man is still calm as he says, "So, you were preparing to become a civil servant?" Realizing he was still there, my grip on the book tightened as I said, "Yeah, this seemed like the only path left for me. For someone like me that was nothing, it seemed like the only way to focus on those crooks, with my head high." "But," the man says, remaining calm, "this injustice you are speaking of, you think it'll go away if you catch the crooks?" The man smirks and says, "Then I have one last question for you, young man." He continues as he removes his wallet out from his inner coat pocket. "Let's say you do become a government tax authority, and then you find another person high up that has committed tax fraud. If you turn a blind eye, no one will ever know." He looked at me and continued saying, "And if I recall correctly, you said you got fired for reporting an executive at your old job, right?" Now, I was getting a little annoyed. Then the man asked me a question. "Would you do it again?" His calm eyes were getting to me as I was getting annoyed. Then I replied, "There's a saying, the blade of justice is blind. It doesn't matter who it is. I'd report them without a second thought." The man says, "The blade of justice is blind." He removes a notebook out of his wallet. What an intriguing young man. Then, unexpectedly, he says, "You need more experience." That got me surprised as I said, "Pardon me?" Suddenly, the look in his eyes changes as he says in his mind, "Does he really have what it takes to be the blade of justice he speaks of?" He laughs, "Ha ha 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 ha," and says, "Color me intrigued. I'm curious to see where you'll be when I see you again, when you've overcome these immediate difficulties. Let's see if you're a man of your word." He rips a paper from his notebook and says, "This is a tax accountant office, I know. I'd like for you to gain some experience there." As I took the paper confused, I said, "Well, what?" He continues saying, "And that's my number at the bottom. Call me if you ever need my help in the future." His next line shocked me as he said, "But I'll only help you once." As I took the note, "A tax accountant office? But why me?" He grinned as he said, "Why not?" I was confused as I said, "Well, I'm not sure why you'd help a passing stranger like me." The man surprised me as he said, "You made me want to show you that there is such a thing as opportunity in this world." I was so shocked I could barely speak. Then I bowed and said, Thank you. I promise to repay you someday." As he opened the door of his car, "I'm not expecting anything in return. It's purely out of goodwill." I was hesitant as I asked, "Oh, and I hope you don't mind me asking, but this isn't some pyramid scheme, right?" The man stopped for a moment and then burst into laughter. "Ha ha 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 ha." Seeing him laugh, I became a little hesitant. "I'm sorry." He slowed down but was still chuckling. "That's quite all right. I like how scrupulous you are. And you have no obligation to take the opportunity I've given you." The man reinstates his words, "But I'd like you to remember what I said. After you become a civil servant, I'll only help you once." As he drove off, I watched his car disappear into the horizon. Back in his car, the man was speaking to himself. "The blade of justice is blind. It sounds like the blade would be fair in where it swings." He taps at his eyes. "But because it's blind, it could just as easily cut the one that wields it." As the man left, I took a look at the paper he gave me. It had the name of a tax service and his phone number. Recalling his words, I said, "I'll see you again once you've learned that lesson." Since the bridge incident, 2 months have gone by. I watched lectures in the morning and went to work at the tax accountant office in the afternoon. The work was easy enough that I didn't have to concentrate too hard, which allowed me to listen to what's happening around me. And I heard everything. Whenever I was making copies or got coffee, I listened. And then finally, the day came for my interview. Interviewer: final question. Mr. Shin, what kind of civil servant do you aspire to be? I was calm as I said, a guardian to honest taxpayers and bringer of justice to those that convict tax evasion. In a solemn tone, that's the kind of civil servant I aspire to be. Back home, as Mom entered, Jaehyun, didn't I tell you to always check for the milk delivery? I was trembling. Mom? As I turned towards Mom, I was crying. I passed. Mom was shocked as she said, "What? Really?" My mom looked at a picture of her and Dad with us brothers as she said, "Oh my God, am I dreaming? My sweet boy, all your hard work finally paid off. I prayed so hard for you." I hugged her as I said, "It's all thanks to you, Mom," as my mom was sobbing. Your father would have been so proud. Seeing her tears. Mom, are you crying again? The next day as I was going to work, I was speaking in my mind. I got good scores during my training period, landing me a position at a tax office in Seoul. Sometimes it feels like someone is watching over me these days. As I looked up at the sky, I began speaking in my mind again. I've been thinking a lot about that man I met on the bridge. Maybe that's why. Just you watch. I'm going to catch all those crooked thieves with my own 2 hands. Looking at the happenings around me, I spoke in my mind. The future of Korea appears blindingly bright because the number of minors that are receiving rental income is as much as 2,400. In other words, grade school kids are making money as landlords. Yeah, right. It's really their parents abusing the tax system. 12-year-old business owners? No, it's their parents using a loophole to minimize paying taxes. As I was looking at some stats on the paper, I said to myself, unless of course a CEO has decided to go back to grade school to get a refresher on addition and subtraction. But more than anything, these numbers that are flashing before my eyes tell me this is tax evasion. At the office manager, Park comes over and claps his hands saying, "All right, everyone back to work." The other officers looked grumpy as one of them said, "What? Lunch is over already?" Manager Park still clapped, "Look alive, everyone." Then, as he went back to his office and sat on his chair, "Now where did I put those nail clippers?" I walked in and said, "I've been waiting for you, Manager Park. I have something to report to you." He shook trembling as he said, "Gah, you scared me." Relaxing a bit, Manager Park says, "What is it this time?" I replied by forwarding a file. A business is making 108 million won a year renting out commercial spaces, but the owner is only 12 years old. Manager Park looks at his nails and says in an unaffected tone, "And?" I reply, making my point. "And the income rate is only 39%, meaning 65 million is supposedly going to expenses. Sir, I'm requesting permission to perform a tax investigation." Jaehyun's inner thoughts. I was standing in front on the Manager Park, waiting for his reply, but this was not what I expected. Manager Park says, shocked, "Tax evasion?" I reply in a frank tone, "That's right, sir. I'm sure of it." Manager Park sighs. "And what makes you so sure?" I try to make him recall what I said before. A business is making 108 million won a year renting out commercial spaces, but the owner is only 12 years old. Manager Park is busy looking at a file as he raises his hand, gesturing to me to hand over the file. "And," I replied dumbstruck, "doesn't that sound suspicious to you?" I continued, "And the income rate is only 39%, meaning 65 million won is supposedly going to expenses every year." He goes through the file and says, "So, you want to investigate them, huh?" After looking through the file, he taps the file on my chest and says, "Leave it alone. Forget the tax investigation." I was dumbstruck as I said, "Sir, but the owner is a minor. It's definitely a case of tax fraud." Manager Park got angry as he said, "I said leave it." He places his hand on a file on his table and says, "And you know what? It's not even our business. This is for the property tax department." I try to persuade, "But sir," Manager Park gets angry again. "Inspector Shin, you've been here, what, 2 months? Do you even know how to read financial statements?" He looks up at me. "Are you hearing me?" I was taken aback as I said, "Sir, but..." He slams his hand on the table. I said leave it alone. As I came out of the office, I sighed. Just then, a female colleague came over and said, "Inspector Shin, could I speak to you for a moment?" She looks around and says, "This is about Imseong Shopping Center, right?" She looks around again. "You should just leave it alone." I again try to say, "But..." She cuts my sentence midway and says in a whisper, "Shh. Everyone knows. The manager and section chief are friends with the owners." I was shocked on hearing that. "What?" She continued, "You worked really hard to get this job. Don't overdo it." She leans in to whisper. "Besides, it won't be long until the section chief retires." Just then, he could hear the previous manager's words in his ear. "I told you you'd snap." Then he heard a snap sound and said, "No." The whole staff began to look at me as I said out loud, "This isn't why I became a civil servant. This money belongs to the citizens of this country. Why are you letting people steal money from them? Are we thugs?" My female colleague tries to whisper, "Inspector Shin." But I still continued. Some people have to obey the law, while others sidestep it. This is lawlessness. The staff begins to whisper. One staff member whispers, "How long has he been here?" While another one says, "Who's his supervisor?" Hearing them, I rub my hand through my hair and say, "Am I wrong?" Just then, Manager Park yells from his office, "Jae-hyun Shin." He comes running out of his office and says, "Who do you think you are?" Another coworker tries to calm him down. Manager Park continues in an angry tone, "If that's how you want to do things, you can leave right now." The female coworker whispers to me, "Apologize, hurry." Manager Park continues, "Who do you think you are? You know how many people are out there just waiting to take your job?" I didn't say a word and turned to leave. The female coworker called out, "Inspector Shin." As I was walking towards the door, Manager Park said, "A grown man should know his place in this world." As I slam the door behind me, my eyes burn with fury as I say to myself, "Disgusting. How dare they call themselves civil servants?" Then as I dial a number, I say to myself, "Take a deep breath. I can do this." As the bell rings, I recall he said, "I'll only help you once." The ring kept on ringing and I was clenching my wrist in anger. As he received the call, I murmured, "Well, that was quick." Then into the phone, "How much can you help me?" The man said, "Just tell me what you need. I'll be the judge of what can and can't be done." So I told him why I called. "There's a 12-year-old that owns a building." The man says to himself, "The true owner is the CEO of Imseong CEO, Jong-hak Em. It looks like my manager and section chief of the property tax department are in cahoots with him." Then the man says to Jae-hyun, "What do you need?" I reply, "I'm going to get the crooks that committed the tax fraud and got paid for it. I'm going to get everyone involved." The man says calmly, "Mr. Shin, let me remind you that this is your one and only chance." His voice is cautious. "Is this how you want to use it?" It was like a drum was beating around me as I thought, "One chance? My one and only chance?" I reply in a stern tone, "Yes, it is." Then I say to myself, "Of course it is. Does he even have to ask?" I didn't know I was loud as the man laughed slightly. I continued, "I'm going to crush those dirtbags. I took this job because I wanted to catch sons of bees like them." The man laughs out loudly, "Ha ha ha ha," and says, "How refreshing. Very well, do as you please. From this moment on, no one will be able to stand in your way." From that moment, I began my crack on the perpetrators. "Hello, I'm calling from the Beomson tax office in Seoul. I'm from the income tax department. Could I speak with the tax accountant, please?" Back in his office, the man says, "I'm looking forward to seeing what you can do." Back at the office, Manager Park yells, "Jae-hyun Shin!" He continues yelling, "It was you, wasn't it? You son of a bitch. You called the tax accountant, didn't you? Answer me." I replied calmly as I sat at my desk. "Yep, it was me." Manager Park says, What? What did you say?" As I was typing away on my keyboard, "Sir, can't you see I'm working? Could you stop bothering me?" He gets angry and ruffles his hair as he yells, "Ah! Who hired this damn kid?" A male coworker says, trying to calm him, "Sir." Then he says to me, "Inspector Shin, you apologize to the manager this instant." Just then the section chief yells out, "Lunch was over an hour ago. Why aren't you all working?" Manager Park tries to clarify, "Section Chief Kim? Well, it's just, huh?" As he turns around, he sees it's the superintendent of the Beomson Tax Department, Seung-won Heo, S. Superintendent. Superintendent Seung-won says in a calm tone, "Don't mind me, just get back to work." Section Chief Jae-hyun Kim says in a tone with a little annoyance, "You heard him." Superintendent Seung-won says, "By the way, I thought I heard cursing. I must have misheard, right?" Manager Park bows as he says, "Of course, sir." Superintendent Seung-won smiles and says, "Good, let's you and I have a talk." Manager Park looks worried. "Sir?" Superintendent Seung-won looks towards the section chief. "Oh, and you too, Section Chief Kim." Section Chief Kim says, trembling, "Sir? Me too? But why?" Then the superintendent looks around and says, "And let's see." He sees me sitting at my desk. "And you must be Inspector Jae-hyun Shin, right?" I got up and looked towards him. "Yes, Superintendent." He smiles at me and says, "I hope you'll let me retire in peace, Mr. Shin." Everyone gets shocked on hearing him as I say to myself, "What? Why would the superintendent say that?" The staff also begins to whisper as a male coworker says, "Retire in peace." What does he mean? A female coworker says, "Why would Inspector Shin have anything to do with that?" Though I kept my calm and replied, "If you have nothing shameful to hide as a civil servant, I don't see why not, Superintendent." Manager Park tries to say, "Sir?" Superintendent Seung-won says, "Shameful? That's a tricky concept." He turns back and looks at the manager and section chief and says, "But at least I can say I haven't been as bold-faced as these two." Both of them say in unison, "What do you mean by that, sir?" He says in a little loud tone, "Come with me, you two." Section Chief Kim says, Superintendent," while Manager Park tries to avoid. if I could just finish what I was doing. But one look from his eye. Did I stutter, director? Both of them smile and say, Section Chief Kim says, haha, no sir, while Manager Park follows confused. As they enter the head office, the superintendent slams the door as they all enter the office. The staff stands near the door trembling as I was busy typing away at my work. After finishing my work, I stretched out, phew, one. The staff begins to whisper as they see me least bothered. One coworker says, just who is this kid? As the staff was whispering about Jaehyun, a man enters and walks towards the head office. As he is walking, he smiles and says in his mind, a new hire must have slipped up, as he fixes his tie. But I'm a tax accountant with 20 years of experience. This'll be a cinch to take care of. As he swings open the door, well, if it isn't my two favorite civil servants, it's been a while. As he enters, he sees Manager Park and Section Chief Kim sitting on the sofa with grim faces. Seeing them, the man says, huh? What's the matter? Section Chief Kim says, hey, you're here. The man looks worried and says, don't tell me there's been an order for an income tax cross-examination. Manager Park doesn't look up and says, no, it's nothing like that. Section Chief Kim says in a grim tone, it's worse. I can't believe this is happening just before my retirement. The man yells worried, would you spit it out already? The man gets worried as he sees a file. You said he's a brand new hire and only grade 7. How did things get this out of hand? Section Chief Kim crushes the can he was holding in his hand as he says, he has some big guns backing him up. Manager Park says as he takes a sip of his coffee, if only I'd known. Continuing, Manager Park says, they're turning it over to the prosecutor's office. The man says, shocked, what? The public prosecutor? But why? Section Chief says, the superintendent gave us the orders himself. He said to let the new kid do as he pleases. The man freaks out saying, isn't there anything we can do? Section Chief puts his hands on his head in despair and says, it's out of my hands. Later, the man is called to speak with Jaehyun. Jaehyun's POV, as the man sat on the chair. He began to wipe his sweat as the coffee paper cup he was holding gets crushed in his hand. He says, the Director General of Headquarters gave the order himself? The Director General? As the man was reading a letter I gave to him, the color of his face fades as he says, okay, I've read everything up to here. Thank you. As I was writing in the papers, I said, I think that concludes your statement. Then I looked up at him and asked, do you have anything else you'd like to add? The man keeps on looking at the paper I gave him as he says, no. Seeing everything is done, I said, then you're free to go, sir. Thank you for your cooperation. The man wipes his sweat as he walks towards the door and says, so, I'm really done, right? As I was busy typing away at my keyboard, I said, yes, take care. The man says in a wearily tone, okay, you too. As the man left, I was typing the final details in the report. Then I said to myself, that completes the notice. It's my first tax evasion case. As I stretched out a bit, it's just like he said, there's no one to stop me. Maybe I should finish up tomorrow. As I looked at the time, it was 10 minutes past 7 at night. I became a little nervous as I said, why do I suddenly feel nervous? Again, the previous manager's words came back into my mind. I told you you'd snap. I regained myself as I packed for the day and left to go back home. On my way back home, I began to speak in my mind. Everything went smoothly today, but will it be the same tomorrow? As I was walking busy in my thoughts, I heard a car honk behind me. As I looked over to the parking lot, I saw a car parked, and the man from the bridge called me out. Hey, Riverman. Seeing him, I walked over and said, sir? He smiles on seeing me and says, get in. You haven't had dinner yet, have you? So, as I got on board, he drove off. On the way, I asked, to what do I owe the pleasure? He smiled as he said, oh, I wanted to surprise you. You know, I'm actually quite a busy man, but I still waited for you out there. I looked at him and said, why go through all this trouble? Where are we going? As he stops the car, he says, laughing lightly, ha 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 ha, I've helped you twice already. Seeing my confused look, he says, how about you just trust me this time? As we got out, I was standing in front of a 5-star restaurant. As we went inside and came to the table booked by him for us, I was spellbound by the menu laid out on the table. The menu that was laid on the table had sashimi with gold flaxes. I never thought I'd see this in person. As he came behind me, he said, smiling, enjoy. You've earned it, and this is just the first course. There'll be more. As I began to eat, I said, thank you. Then I smiled inside my head and said, there's more? As I was eating away, the man says, I hope you don't mind if I talk a bit while you eat. As he was pouring his drink, he says, give a person unbridled power, and you will see who they really are. It's a theory that my boss has. He continues saying, you could have gone for fame or wealth. As I continued eating, but you stayed true to your duties. I stopped and said, it's like they say, easy come, easy go, right? Besides, nothing in this world is free. He smiles as he says, for such a prudent young man, you certainly wasted no time calling me. As he keeps his cup on the table, I know that you are no average man. I replied in a frank tone, the fact that you gave me such a sudden opportunity means that I had to prove myself. I continued, and it just so happened that I needed such an opportunity. The man says again as he keeps his cup on the table, oh ho, I was right about you. Then he introduces himself. My name is Seon-Gyun Lee. section chief of the property tax department at the Samseong tax office. I was shocked on hearing his introduction. What? Samseong tax office? Jaehyun speaking in his mind. The Samseong office is comparable to the Seocho, Yoksam, Banpo, and Gangnam offices, the best of the best. He's definitely in the big leagues. But still, how could a section chief make a call to a superintendent? Just then I heard footsteps out of our room. Seon-gyun says in a calm tone, "Ah, he must be here. Come in, sir." As the man enters, he says, "Apologies, I got caught in traffic." Seon-gyun smiles and says, "I see, Director General." I was shocked on hearing who the man was. "Director General?" As he looks towards me, he says, with his hands in his pockets, "So this is him?" But then I recalled there are no Director Generals in tax offices. That means he must be in charge of an entire region. The man smiles, so I was about to get and introduce myself. "Hello, my name is..." As I was thinking, could he be from headquarters? But he stops me from getting up and says, smiling, "Oh, no need to get up. Someone that takes down his own superiors need not be nervous of a lowly Director General." I say in my mind, "Nervous? Well, I can't help but wonder if this is some kind of trap." I still manage to say, "I'm Jaehyun Shin." Just then, Seon-gyun gets up and says, "I'll step out, Director General." Seeing him walk out, I became nervous as I said, "Where are you going?" The Director General waves as he says, "Okay, I'll see you outside." Then he tells me as I was still standing, "Have a seat." I reply nervously, "Oh, yes, sir." I thought in my mind, "What now?" He looks at me and says, "Could I bother you for a drink?" "Okay." I was shocked as I said in my mind, "What?" Then as I relaxed a bit, "Of course, sir." As he pours me a drink, he says, "Mr. Shin." I looked at him with a questioning look. Then he says, "Let me cut directly to the chase. Will you become my blade?" The Director General just asked me to be his blade. I was shocked and surprised as I said, "Your blade?" Then he gave me his introduction. The name's Chi-ho-min, Director General of the National Tax Services Investigation Bureau. I was dumbstruck as he said he was the Director General of the Bureau of Investigation. He says in a calm tone, "There is no pressure to take my offer, of course." I try to remain calm. "So, what's the catch?" Chi-ho-min says in a calm tone, "There's no catch." Just then clunks his chopsticks. "I'm asking you to do as you please." He grins as I said to know we are on the same page. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Chi-ho-min chuckles. "Why, you're a civil servant who wants to catch tax evaders," he says as he flips his cup of tea upside down on the table. "And that's all I'm asking of you. Keep going after the kind of people you want to go after." I began to think in my mind, it's a bit of an oversimplification, but he's right. But then I take my chance and ask, "If you give me that kind of authority?" I picked my cup of water and poured some from my cup into his and said, "There's always the chance I could go after someone in your camp." He smirks. "Well, that can't be helped. It was my decision after all." He continues as he takes a sip. "Of course you are free to refuse." I was quiet for a few seconds, then I raised my cup and held it in front of Chi-ho-min and said in a solemn tone, "I'd be honored to wield that blade." In a little cautious tone, "As long as you can guarantee that I can use it as I like." Chi-ho-min takes the cup and says proudly, "Very good. You can stay at the Byomson office for now, but I'd like you to come to the Samsung office next year if a spot opens up." I spoke hoping to get the chance. "Samsung, this is my chance. It doesn't matter who it is. All I have to do is go after tax evaders." As I entered the building of Byomson tax office, the office staff began whispering, "He's here." Another male coworker said, "He's back to work," while another one said, "He really has no shame." As I passed by all of them, I wished, "Good morning." Then as I came to my table, I sighed in relief. As the day went by, I noticed the staff was distancing themselves from me. Seeing this, I said in my mind, "Am I really going to be the office outcast at the age of 30? But then I felt relieved. Actually, this is pretty novel. I'll just keep doing my job, I guess. Then I recalled and began to speak in my mind. The two men I met yesterday, Section Chief of Property Tax at the Samseong Tax Office, Seon-gyun Lee, and the Director General of the Investigation Bureau, Chi-ho-min. Any civil servant at my level would kill to have these kinds of connections. Although, I guess it doesn't change anything at the moment. Just then, a person came over to my desk as I was working and says, "Hey Shin." So, I looked up, and on seeing the person said, "Good morning, Section Chief Kim." He spoke in a frank tone. "How about you lay off it?" I look up at him and say, "Sir?" Before I could say another word, he got angry and bangs his hands on my desk and says, "You scoundrel, you really think you're a hotshot, don't you?" I try to retaliate and said, "I'm not sure what." Just then, someone from behind me says, "What's going on here?" As I turn around, I see a man who smiles as he waves his hand and says, well, if it isn't Gyehyun Kim, the great shame of the Byomson office." The person was none other than the Section Chief of the Property Tax Department, Seon Ho-ham. He continues to say, "It's a miracle you haven't been axed yet." Kim gets annoyed as he says, "You stay out of this." Seon Ho-ham pretends to be sacred and says, "Whoa now." Then he says, pointing his finger at Kim, don't you know you've completely ruined our reputation as civil servants? But when Gyehyun Kim says, how about you think about that before you yell at me? Seono Ham behaves a little odd as he pushes Gyehyun Kim out of the office and says, that's right, that's your cue to get lost. As they both leave, another voice gets my attention. Is Inspector Jae-hyun Shin here? Since I was sitting down, I raised my hand and said, right here, sir. The man says, ah, there you are. Do you have a minute? So I got up and said, how can I help you, sir? The man says, it'll just take a minute. Let's head to the break room. As we enter the break room, he removes a lollipop and says, Tata, with a smile. Here, it's grape. My favorite. As I took it, I said, thank you. As he removed another one and began to open his lollipop. Then he says, I don't like to be too formal, you know. I heard there's a case you'd like to send over to my department. I reply in a frank tone. That's right, sir. I suspect that the owner of the Imseong shopping center is guilty of tax evasion. In fact, the CEO is a 12-year-old child. I continue telling, according to the financial statements, the building and the lot is worth 1.5 billion won. The man recalls he saw a little girl with the adult owner of the building and says in his mind, there's no way that could be hers. Then the man says, in that case, someone might be using a loophole to gift the building and land and is using it to make money, right? I reply in a frank, calm tone, that's what it looks like. Then the man says as he is removing something from his pocket, okay, now why don't you take a look at this? As he removes the papers from his pocket, he says, it's the Imseong Shopping Center financial statements. As I took the statements, I read them and said, a debt of 1.4 billion and 1.3 billion of that is loans. Continuing, so they borrowed 1.3 billion, added 200 million of existing cash, and bought a lot of buildings worth 1.5 billion, right? The man says, precisely. Very good, Inspector Shin. Then, as I was taking a closer look, so we know where the money is coming from. I get a little lost and say in my mind, wait, did I miss something? Then it strikes to me, it's from the parents, right? I look at the man with the hope of being correct, but his face told I wasn't. Then I recalled and said, nope, the bank. But all he says is, think again. I say in my mind, shoot, I was off. Then where? Then I tell the man, they took a secured loan against their parents' shopping center, then bought the shopping center from the parents with the money. The man says, pleased, bingo! You got it, Shin? I got angry as I said, those dirty weasels! Now it's my time for them to pay the price cheating the NTS. The man says in a calm tone, not so fast, have you ever heard of an onerous gift? I reply frankly, yes. Then I say in my mind, if you get 1.5 billion, you're subject to gift tax. Considering this gift tax is fairly hefty, the recipient can end up with a pretty nasty bill in taxes. But an onerous gift is different. If you take out a loan from the bank and make the recipient of the gift pay off the loan, that's called a transfer, which means much less taxes to pay, and it's completely legal. Just then the man pats me hard on my back and says, don't worry, there's still a way. I'll show you, but you'll have to work for it. As I came and stood at the door of the building, I was unaware of what the staff was speaking about me. The man from yesterday was standing beside his car, as he said to himself, that Inspector Shin, he's really something. To think that he'd refuse my help and insist on looking into it himself. Then he sees him walking over and says, waving, hey Shin, over here. As I walk over, he sees me walking and says in his mind, but how is he walking with such confidence? One could easily mistake him for a seasoned veteran. As both of them get on board the car, the man drives off. Along the way, he says, so, how do our chances look? I reply in a firm tone, I think I got the gist. I explain by telling, the idea is to hand over your assets to your children while minimizing taxes owed as much as possible, right? I continued, but according to the tax report, the bank needs to be paid back 1.3 billion won. The man says, and who needs to pay back that money? I reply calmly, it should be the child, but it's really the parents, and there needs to be an explanation of who paid it back. The man smiles and says, very good. What next? I replied, well, before I could complete my sentence, he stopped the car. Well, it looks like we're already here. As I got out of the car and looked at the building in front of me, I said, so this is Imseong Co. Then the man hands me another statement and says, here you go. This is that kid's CEO's bank statements. As I look at the statements, I said, wow, they really thought this out. It's really clean. The man says, they always use a tax accountant. Now look at this. As he points out in the statement, I say, a bank account for transactions. Then I see him hold a folder. Wait, is that a notice of taxation? The man says, you always need solid proof as backup. Now, you ready to go in? As I slam open the door, I say in an authoritative tone, greetings from the Byeomsan tax office. I hope your slush funds are in good shape. On seeing us, one of the men says, what's the meaning of this? As I step inside the main office and look at the men sitting on the sofa, I say, hey, if it isn't our very own section chief and deputy manager. Manager Park says furiously, Inspector Shin, are you really going to speak to your superiors like that? I reply, as a matter of fact, I am. Manager Park continues, what did you say? Are you out of your mind? I'm your boss, you hear me? I get a little angry and said, Boss? Then why don't you acting like one? For a criminal, you sure like to throw around your title as a civil servant. Now more. I need to sit. Manager Park gets furious as he gets up and says, I swear I'll crush you with my own 2 hands. Section Chief Kim says, stopping Park, that's enough. Sit. A man smiles as he takes a sip of his tea. Where did you get this kid? I swear. So, this must be the problem child I've been hearing so much about? He continues. Whoa now. Problem child? How about we settle on our office's little menace? He then says, with crooked eyes, listen here, young man. I'd think twice if I were you. I reply with a frank tone. The name's Jaehyun Shin, and I can make my own decisions. Thank you. As I slide a paper towards them. Now, why don't you take a look at this, sir? The man refuses to look and says, what is this? I'm not interested. I reply smirking. I'll just have to give it to little Miss Yeji Im. Let's see. I wonder if her final school bell is rung yet. The man gets angry and says, you scoundrel. He swipes the paper from the table and says, I'll take a look, you smart aleck, and keep my daughter's name out of that filthy mouth of yours. He gets shocked and yells, what? 500 million won in taxes? This is ridiculous. I reply frankly. Yes, it's much less than you expected, isn't it? The man crumbles the paper as he says, this is outrageous. I say in my mind, of course it is, because the amount you actually owe is, as I could see the number on his head, 1.1 billion won. The man tries to reinstate. It wasn't a gift, it was a transfer, and I've paid my transfer tax. You hear me? I reply calmly. A transfer implies that you received something in return. And, in your case, it got certified as a transfer by you handing over the debt, too, correct? The man says in a frank tone, that's right. My daughter is paying back the debt with the money she's earning from the shopping center. I reply with a smirk, are you sure you aren't paying for her? He laughs and says, ha, where's your proof? I say to myself, I cannot waver in this battle of wills. So I remain calm and say, I saw the business owner's bank account statement. He simply says, what of it? Section Chief Kim says, the exact amount of loan repayment seems to be going out of the account. I continue, it's a 30-year loan for 1.3 billion won. That's 42 million a year. If the shopping center's annual income is 108 million, then isn't it natural that the net profit be 42 million? I sigh as I say in my mind, sigh. Is this guy a civil servant or a private tax agent? Just then the man says, easy now, gentlemen. I'm not done yet. Knowing what he's going to say, I push forward a paper and say, that's why I brought this. The man picks the paper and says, huh? What's this? Manager Park gasps on seeing the paper. I say calmly as I take a sip of my coffee. They're the statements from your daughter's second bank account. I continue. There's a steady deposit of 3.5 million a month, a total of 42 million a year. I lean forward and say, how nice of you to give an employee's salary's worth of spending money to your daughter while you are billions in debt. This is where you've been funneling the money to go to the bank, isn't it? The man says, huge ... I reinstate my point. Mr. Im, we've done our homework. I'll give you time to explain. Manager Park gets furious. Why the hell did you put the money directly into her account without consulting with us first? The man is only able to say, what? As Section Chief Kim grabs the papers, Manager Park says angrily, are you stupid? You had no less than 2 experts helping you. The man who came with me smiles and says, nice, Jaehyun. The man gets angry and takes hold of Manager Park's collar and says, I helped your son get out of compulsory military service, you fool? Manager Park says, yelling back, you didn't do jack. Then I say, shall I continue, sir? The man who came with me says, smiling, yes, go on. I take a look at the papers. I see you don't have an explanation. So then I'll be imposing taxes based on sufficient evidence to do so. As we both get up, I say, smiling, we look forward to your accurate and timely payment. As I came out, I felt like I had slayed a dragon. The shopping center man says, did you come here to put on a one-man show? You can take your accurate and timely payment and shove it. He dials a number and smirks. You underestimated me, kid. Just, you wait. Seeing him dial a number, we both take a seat once again. The shopping center man says on the phone, Chief Gi, how have you been? Me? I'm great. The man who came with me says, really? I look at them, confused. Manager Park said, smiling, Chief Gi, from the Byeomsan police station? The man says, fantastic. Well, the reason I'm actually calling is, you know how I'm close with Section Chief Kim from the Income Tax Department and Manager Park? He continues. Well, it turns out they're in a bit of a bind. The voice on the phone says, what? The shopping center man gets shocked and says, what do you mean I have the wrong number? What are you saying? We're friends. Hello? Hello? Section Chief Kim says, shocked, what? While Manager Park says, what's going on? Just then I got a text message that surprised me. A text message? On seeing the message, I say in my mind, oh, it's Section Chief Seon-gyun Lee. As I read the message, I smirked and said in my mind, so this is what it feels like to have the big guns on your side. The man who came with me says, smiling, Shall we continue, Jaehyun? The shopping center man dials again and gets a busy message. He gets up screaming as he holds his head. Damn it all! Then I got up and said in a frank tone, please let your daughter know that we look forward to her timely payment. The man looks worried and says, he will wait. Then with trembling hands he says as he hands me an envelope, I'll pay the 500 million. I'll pay it. Then as he pushes the envelope towards me, and this is something a little extra. As I take hold of the envelope, the man grinned and said, that's right, that's all you needed to back down. So why all the fuss? But the next moment, all of them were shocked as I ripped the envelope without even looking what's inside. The shopping center man leaps out to reach the shreds. Hey, what are you doing? I looked at them with a stern face. If you have that kind of money, use it to pay your taxes. The man says distraught, you're completely insane. I didn't waver and said, Im Seong-seo will soon be subject to tax investigation. Also, I suggest you get ready to explain yourself to the public prosecutor. After a few days, the day came to raid the office. As we were going about, I asked the staff, did you get the laptop too? A staff member says, yes, sir. Everything's ready. As they were packing the stuff, Manager Park came over and said, it's only our first offense, while Section Chief Kim was getting angry as he said, don't touch my things. As they were being let out, Manager Park yelled, get your hands off me. I can walk by myself. A office coworker says, what a disaster. Another one says, a tax official getting arrested for assisting with tax evasion. What a disgrace. Just then, someone places his hand on my shoulder and says, Inspector Shin. I turned around and saw it was the man. Can we talk? Turns out he is the superintendent. As he handed me a lollipop, he said, it's red ginseng flavor. Give it a try. As I took it, oh, thank you. Seeing the lollipop, I thought to myself, everyone seems to like candy around here. He smiles and says, good work. Another man swirls on the chair and says, I was surprised too. If I didn't know any better, I'd think he was a 10-year veteran. Seeing him, I smiled as I said in my mind, when did Section Chief Ham get here? Then, the superintendent says, Section Chief Jaehyun Kim went into cahoots with Im Seong-seo as soon as he arrived at this office, but no one could touch him because he had connections up top. Section Chief Ham says, you won't believe how many other tax inspectors he's poisoned, but you sure took care of him and Manager Park? I felt shy being praised by them. Then the superintendent says, but there are many more like them. So Section Chief Ham and I have made up our minds. We want to join forces with you and your allies and clean house once and for all. I was still shy as I said, I'm flattered, but I'm really no one special. My grip on my lollipop tightened as I said, my father passed away and my mother is ill. I had to fight tooth and nail to get this far. Considering everything I've been through, there was no way I was going to trade that in to become a crooked civil servant. He pats my shoulder as he says, that's exactly what makes you special. He continues, it's only human to struggle to do what's right, but you did it anyway. He says, smiling, do as you please, Inspector Shin. We'll make sure no one gets in your way. I try to state the facts. There's no telling how messy things will get, sir. He smiles and says, I suppose it's my turn to show what I'm capable of. He smiles and says, tell me, which department would be easiest for you to do your job? After a few days, I joined my new office. As I stood in front of my head, he said, so you're the rookie that's coming to the investigation department? I replied, yes, that's right, sir. The man was investigator Myong-jung Kim. On seeing him, I said in my mind, can I trust him? Well, there was only one way to find out, so I took a close look at him. I could see he was worried as I said in my mind, let's find out. He was looking worried as I could not see any number on top of his head. Looks like he's clean. Myong-jung Kim says, Jaehyun Shin, right? I replied, yes, sir. Then he says, walking towards a hall, follow me. As I enter with him into an office, he sits and opens his laptop. He says in a frank tone, I understand you're here to report a case of tax evasion. I look at him and say in my mind, he's taking me on a case already? Without any kind of training? Myong-jung Kim says, Minji Choi, correct? Your identity will be protected. Do you agree to being recorded, ma'am? The lady says, yes. Though she was fidgeting, she was calm as Myong-jung says, very well. He pressed the record button and said, let's begin. As I see them, I say, maybe this is for the best. This is my chance. As the recording was going on, I said to myself, my hunt for tax-evading scum starts now. As I became part of my first investigation, the girl sitting on the chair was evidently nervous. The girl looks scared as she says, I think that the owner of our grocery store is evading taxes. Myong-jung Kim looks at the girl and says, and why do you think that? The girl says, he charges full price when people pay with card but gives a discount for cash. Myong-jung says, but that's very common. The girl only says, oh ... Then Myong-jung says in a serious tone, this isn't about something personal, is it? If not, we'll investigate it. Of course. The girl stutters, nothing. It's nothing like that. The other officer says, Sometimes there are cases in which people report someone to get personal revenge. But whatever the reason, if there is any suspicion of tax evasion, we have to investigate it. As the recording was going on, because that is our department's duty. How many employees work at your store? The girl says, 12? Maybe 15? Oh, and he never pays us on time despite all that income. The other officer says, well, the owner could be really short on cash. The girl says, I've seen him keep a bunch of cash in his safe. She removes her phone and shows a picture. Myungjung says, seeing the photo, I see you have evidence. The girl says, yes, I took the picture myself. We all looked at the phone screen as I said, is this the owner? The girls replied, yes, as she shows another picture of the vault full of cash. The other officer says, it doesn't look like he should have trouble paying his employees. Seeing so much cash, I also said, wow. Myungjung Kim, on the other hand, says, do you have any other photos? The girl looks down sadly and says, no, I was afraid I'd get caught. Just then, the other officer says, whispering, just a moment, sir. Most people bring some ledgers with them, but it looks like this person isn't quite sure. Myungjung Kim whispered, no, it's up to us to find out for sure. Then he gets up and says, Ms. Minju Choi, thank you again for coming in and reporting this case. As we both come out of the other tax officer office, Myungjung Kim says, did you get all that? I replied, yes, sir. So, now what? Myungjung Kim says, in our department, you don't share the details of your cases with your colleagues. As he hands me a card, I'm the only one that has eyes on everything. So report directly to me. As I took the card, understood, sir. As we begin to walk, you usually work in pairs, but we're short on hands. You'll have to take on this case alone. I say, shocked. Sir, you want me to investigate? He nods as we go back to the office. Along the way, I speak in my mind, seeing the card in my hand. On my first day, without any training. Then I recall, that's right, the address is on the back of that business card. Then I question myself, alone? But what if I make a mistake? And on my first day too. Then I left the office and now I was standing in front of the shopping center. As I entered the store, I could hear the vendors calling out, all right, we have bananas on sale. 2,001 for a bunch, while another one called out, kiwis for 8,001 per kilo. Just then, I saw an employee stop a lady customer as he said in a little angry tone, whoa, ma'am, you can't just touch the goods like that. The lady says, surprised. What? I just wanted to take a closer look. Just then, another employee held a boy's collar as the boy said, Mister, why is paying with the card more expense? As the man held the collar of the little boy, he said, snarling, what's that now? He yells in the boy's face. Paying with cards is always more expensive. What's so strange about that? The boy, scared to his wits, says trembling, oh, okay, I'll just buy it. Seeing all this, I say to myself, the price difference is much more severe than I expected. The cash price is way too cheap. Just then, the shop owner comes out and yells, look here, you. The person was the owner of the side store who also yells out, I won't stand for this anymore. You can't keep dropping your prices 101 every day. Do you want all our businesses to go under or what? The owner yells back, scram, lady. Don't come in my store whining just because yours is doing poorly. Seeing them, I say to myself, she must be from a competitor store. His prices must be making it hard to compete. Then I get shocked as I see the huge amount of tax evasion on his head. Something's not right. How can he still be making money when he's selling at such low prices? And look how much he's withheld in taxes. After spending a day at the store, I come out and say, okay, that's enough field work. I need to work out a strategy now. I headed over to a park, and as I was eating a sandwich, I began to speak in my mind. I saw how much he's evaded in taxes, but I don't have any evidence yet. Then I recall the section chief. What made the section chief sure that he was evading taxes? The first thing I have to do is gather evidence. I have a long way to go. Just then, I get a call, so I receive, hello? The voice on the phone says, hello, Inspector Jae-hyun Shin? I reply confused, yes, this is he... The voice says, where are you right now? But I ask, sorry, who is this? The voice says, oh, I see you. Stay right there. The call disconnects. I look at my phone screen confused. Just then, a bicycle screeches to a halt before me, and a voice says, Inspector Shin. I looked up and saw it's a man. Let me introduce myself. I'm Ming Huang, a level 8 clerk in the investigation department. Seeing him, I say, hi, nice to meet you. He says, smiling as he taps his bicycle. Section Chief Myungjung Kim contacted me. Hop on, as I get up and look at his bicycle. But, why are you on a bike? He replies shyly, haha, I actually forgot my car keys. I promised to take you safely back to the office. The man begins to ride really fast. On the way, he hands me papers and says, you left the financial statements at the office. As I took them, I said, oh right, the financial statements. Then, as I look at some of the papers, I say, but this surtax report is interesting too. Annual credit sales are 100 million won, and cash sales 3 million. The man says, is there a problem? I say in a frank tone, the owner really pushes people to pay with cash, so this is a complete lie. As I was going through the other papers, the man says, wow, I heard this is your first case, but it looks like you already got a lead. As I was looking at the papers, yeah, there's no doubt he's underreporting revenue. Just then I found the lead. All right, I got greedy cheat. He accelerates his writing as he says, sounds like you got something good. Let's go figure out a strategy. Back at the store, the shop owner was busy counting cash. 1 leafy green, 2 leafy greens, 3, 4, 5, 6 leafy greens. Boy, do I love my vegetables. Just then he hears a knock on his door, so he says, come on in. A lady employee enters and says in a scared look, sir, I wanted to talk about my paycheck. The owner frowns as she says, what? I already gave you last month's pay. The girl tries to say, you said that after 3 months you'd start paying me minimum wage. The owner leans back and says, is your probationary period over already? The girl says, yeah. The owner says in a frank tone, didn't you go home early 2 months ago because you came down with the chills? The girl looks confused and says, sir? Oh, yes. The owner says, you know that was the day we get our shipments, right? It was hell. The girl tries to state her position. Oh, but we'd already sold most of the produce and there weren't any customers. The owner says, what? You think we can just close up shop if there aren't any customers around? The girl says, trembling, no, sir. I mean, before she could complete her sentence, the owner says, save it. I don't like your attitude. You're fired. The girl says, well, then can I at least get paid for the work The owner slams his hand on the table as he says, the way you work, you're lucky I paid you anything at all. Now get lost. As she came out, face drained. Oh no, a person says, is this the owner's office? As the girl looks up, she sees it's me. We're here to perform a tax investigation. Ming Huang gives his hand to the girl and says, hello, I'm the labor inspector. The girl who sat on the floor in despair. What? I look at them and say, this is the owner's office, right? Ming bends down and says, offering his hand to the girl, you can stand up now, ma'am. As we enter, the show owner says, slumping back into his chair, what's this? Don't you have to notify before showing up like this? I reply in a frank tone, we can make investigations without prior notice if there is concern that evidence might be destroyed. The shop owner yells, what? Destroy evidence? What do you take me for? A common criminal? I remain calm as I say, we'll find out soon enough, won't we? I continue in a stern tone. My name is Jaehyun Shin, and I'm from the investigation department of Byeomsan Tax Office. We ask for your cooperation in this investigation. It looked like I was getting ready for a boxing match as I said, now sir, it looks like you didn't report your 99 million won in employee wages. The owner says, employee wages? How do you expect me to stay afloat if I report all that? My annual revenue is only 300 million won. I replied frankly, there's something called adequate employee wages. I continued saying, it's a 30 to 40% of revenue and 96 million won would be 32%. That's adequate, right? The owner gets up and laughs as he says, muhahahaha. See? You just proved there's no issue. I stood still looking at his foolish thought. Then I took the initiative to clarify the matter for him. The problem is, you reported your business as having only 4 employees. Maybe it's because you'd be subject to more regulations if you have 5 or more employees. As I look at the girl crying, are you sure you only have 4 employees? The owner yells as he says, now, look here. What's it to you how many employees I have? Then as I take my phone out and show him some pictures on my phone. How about you just come clean? I've seen 10 at the very least. The owner looks dumbstruck. I continue saying as I show him the report. If revenue is 300 million won, then your employee wages should be 240 million won. You must be deep in red, sir. How do you stay afloat? I say as I show him the employee wages report. Ming Huang says to another officer, hey, he really did his homework? The other officer says, seriously, this is getting good. I continue saying, and you reported that only 3% of your revenue is from cash? The owner says, worried, what about it? I reply in a frank tone. From what I've seen, most of your customers pay in cash. Isn't 3% a bit low? The owner says, shaking, I don't know what you're talking about. Who pays with cash in this day and age? I lean over to a laptop and say, as I click away, your security cameras say differently. It's clear as day. Then came the final punch. From what I saw yesterday, only 1 in 10 people paid with card. Your revenue is probably 10 times what you reported. The shop owner retaliates saying, no, it isn't, as if he was punched. Gah, it's only about 2 times more. I reinstate by saying, 2 times your revenue from your cards would be 600 million won, making your total annual revenue 900 million won. Ming adds in saying, also, it looks like there are some problems with your employee welfare. He continues saying, you didn't enroll them in basic health insurance, didn't report temporary employees, didn't create employee contracts, or pay minimum wage. That was another punch to him. Gah! Then I said, you withheld wages and severance pay. He breaks up saying, this won't end by paying those off. I give another blow. You're gonna be a certified criminal. He screams, no! The next day at the office, Ming says, hey, how did that rookie get into investigations in his first year? Another one says, yeah, what's he like? The first one says, I don't know yet. Just then another employee says, hey, he's here. As I walk in, they all gather around me and one of them says, hey, new guy, I heard you closed that Forever Mart case. Ming says, that's amazing. But why did you come to investigations anyway? I was taken by surprise as I said, I volunteered after taking care of the section chief of income tax and manager corruption case. One of them says, shocked, "What? You mean you're the wacko that did those two in?" I said shyly, "Wacko? Yeah, I guess so." Ming says, angry that I was underestimating myself. "No, you did good. Those two were a disgrace." The other one says, "Are you going to get another reward for this case?" I reply by showing off a credit card. "No, it's nothing like that. But the section chief did say we should treat ourselves to dinner." They all cheer as Ming says, "Let's do it." I again saw their enthusiasm. "But he said to get pork, not beef." One of them says, "The section chief is such a cheapskate. What's gotten into him?" Over at the section officer's office as he's busy with his own work, he says, "Why do I feel like someone is talking behind my back?" As we all were at the restaurant, I said to the staff, "All right, everyone, bring it in." As we clanked our drinks, we all said, in unison, "To the Byeomsun Investigation Department." Then Ming says, "Whew, I can't remember the last time I had a proper drink." Another one said, "Tell me about it. Lately it's been all work, sleep, work, sleep." Another one says, "Director Kim must be treating us because we got a new guy. He never does this." I smile as I take a sip. "Haha, really?" Then Ming says, "Anyway, how do you like our department?" I said as I was eating, "I'm not sure yet." Another one says, "Don't you worry. I'll be sure to give you all the help you need." I say in a joyful tone, "Wow, thanks, Clerk Huang." Just then, a gent enters and walks over to the reception and asks, "How much does that table owe?" The receptionist says, "It's 460,000 won." Just then, one of the boys looks over and says, "Hey, someone is paying out bill." The boys get charged and run over as Ming says, "Stop right there. How dare you try to pay for civil servants' entertainment expenses?" The man smiles and says, "Is it because using a card will leave a record? Then I'll just pay with cash." As he reaches for a cash envelope, the boys charge as one of them says, "Are you trying to get us all put in prison for accepting bribes?" I look at what's going on and say, "Is he doing that on purpose?" The officer says, "Definitely. He's trying to make an impression for later." The man smiles as he says, "Well, at least let me introduce myself. My name is Bong Lee. I'm a tax accountant that just opened up my business across the street." Ming says, "Then you really should know better." Suddenly, as I looked at the man, I said in my mind, "Wait, I feel like I've seen him somewhere before." Aha, that's right, the tax accountant at the company that fired me. I broke my disposable spoon as soon as I recognized him. The next day at the office, I sat thinking, tax accountant Bonghan Lee, is he still working at Teal Enterprises? I look up on my computer screen about him. I say to myself, Teal Enterprises. After finishing compulsory military duty, did some part-time work in a warehouse before getting employed at Teal. It's a wholesale and retail company that deals in kitchenware, especially dishes. It's been years since I've heard that company's name. I had a flashback as I recalled the time. A fellow employee says, "Jae-hyun, did you finish checking inventory?" As I was checking on the board in my hand, "Yes, sir, I'm done here." Just then he says, "Yeah? Then you want to help me carry this?" I come running over and say, "Oh, of course." As I lift one box, he says, "Be careful, it's heavy. You could get hurt." Then he says, "By the way, didn't you say you were getting ready for a test or something?" I reply saying, "Me? No, wasn't me." The man smiles and says, "Hey, then why don't you come work with me? You have nothing better to do, right? Might as well make money." Confused, I said, "Pardon?" The next day, he took me to meet someone. "Director, he's the one I told you about." I smile shyly and say, "Nice to meet you. I'm Jae-hyun Shin, the newest member of General Affairs. I'm happy to join the team," the director said, smiling as he held out his hand for a handshake. "Hey, I hear you are very meticulous. Good. I'm counting on you." Back to the present. As I spoke in my mind, the new job seemed great at first, but that was before I found out how corrupt it was. Just then I stopped as I found something. HM? What in the world? A financial statement popped up and it shocked me. What's happening? I couldn't focus anymore. As the numbers kept flashing before me, my head began to ache as I sighed. OF. As I got a hold of myself, I said, recalling seeing the financial statement in place of numbers. "Well, that's new." I say to myself, I've never been able to see anything without actually looking at a person. Could there be another case of tax evasion, even after that VP got fired? There's two possible explanations. I continue speaking to myself. Either something is wrong with my powers or they're up to something again. As Clerk Ming comes over with his lunch, "Inspector Shin, aren't you going to eat?" I replied saying, Clerk Huang, I think I'll pass." As he digs in, he says, "Then don't mind if I do." Hey, this is good. Seeing him enjoying it, I say, "Well then leave some for me, please. I have a fight to attend to." A coworker says, "Fight? With who?" I reply in a frank tone, "With Teal Enterprises." As I get up, he says, "What? Right now?" I get a call to come to the office. As I enter, Section Chief says, "Are you familiar with short-term employee loans? They're kind of advance payments for employees. Do you see where I'm going with this?" I replied, "Yes, sir. Teal Enterprises' short-term employee loans have surpassed 1 billion won. We may have to consider the possibility of illegal premature payouts." Section Chief Kim says, "That's right. They may be using employee loans to cover up premature retirement payouts or bonuses. I add in, and the company kept using provisional payments, but it is unclear where it's coming from. Section Chief then says, I'd like you to investigate, but keep one thing in mind. He continues, the citizens of Korea are not our enemies. Be objective and do things according to the book. I reply in a stern tone, of course, sir. Then, as I came back to my desk, I dialed a number and said on the phone, Tail Enterprises General Affairs Department. Hello, I'm calling from the Beomson Tax Office. The person on the other side of the phone says, Tax Office? How can I help you? I replied saying, we'd like to request the Board of Directors resolution documents relating to executive bonuses. The person on the other side of the phone says, I continue in an authoritative tone. How about I give you 5 minutes? The person on the other side of the phone says, I actually don't have the authority, but I can connect you to the department head. I put my hand on my forehead as I said, okay, I'd appreciate that. This got me thinking, there's no reason they'd be so flustered unless I instantly recognize the voice. Then another voice says, yes, hello? This is Incheol Park, head of general affairs. I reply, yes, hello? We'd like to request the Board of Directors resolution documents relating to executive bonuses. As I remained calm, I remembered he was the one who told me, I told you you'd snap. He says in a calm tone, may I ask your name and department? I replied in a dominative tone. I'm Jaehyun Shin from the Beomson Office Investigations Department. As he leans back in his chair, he says, what? Jaehyun Shin. Hey now. The man was Manager Park. He smiles and says, you're in the bog leagues. I reply in a frank tone, I can't be making personal chit-chat while I'm on duty. Could you quickly fax me the resolution documents? I'll give you 10 minutes. He speaks in a fake friendly tone and says, look, why don't you tell me why you need them first? I reply back in a stern tone, I'll give you 5 minutes. Park gets worried. As he shifts, his chair crackles beneath him. Come now, isn't this a bit much? I again reply in a stern tone, please don't make me repeat myself. Please send it over within 5 minutes. Park gets angry as he snarls, that scoundrel. My coworker says, worried, Inspector Shin? Are you sure you should be so aggressive? As I keep the receiver down. They are tail after all. Then I look at my watch as the time ticks away. Then I say to calm him down. Everything's fine, Clerk Huang. After 5 minutes passed, I called again. This is Beomson Tax Office again. 5 minutes have passed, but I haven't received anything. Park snarks as he says, look here, you little snot-nosed brat, as he grits his teeth. You think you can order me around because I have a cushy government job now? I sigh as I say in a calm tone, sigh. Sir, I'm just doing my job. There's no need to speak to me like that. I say in a casual tone, I don't see what's so difficult about faxing me some resolution documents. He snarls and says, what? Seeing he won't listen, I decide to step up. You'll be receiving a tax investigation notification today. Oh, and you can forget faxing me the documents. He says worried, hey, now wait a... I say in a stern tone, you can bring them in person, right now. As I finish, he yells, you little rat. I quietly keep the receiver down. Clerk Huang comes over and says, wow, I've never seen someone answer the phone like that. My coworker says, they must have something up their sleeves. As I swirl my cold coffee, yeah, chances are high. I continue. I'd say about 100%. As we were getting ready to raid Tail Enterprises, we were unaware of the commotion that was going on inside. Manager Park says, looking worried, it hasn't been that long since we've been investigated. I wonder why they are coming again. Another officer says, my thoughts exactly. What exactly is going on here, Park? Park grips his coffee glass tighter as he says, well, the officer gets angry as he says, spit it out already. Park says nervously, well, the tax inspector used to work directly under me. The officer gets angry and says, I knew it. It's all your fault, you worthless scoundrel. Park trembles as he saves himself. I'm sorry, sir. The officer gets angry and says, banging a file on the desk, why can't you just do your damn job? The other officer says, now, let's not lose our cool, Director. He continues trying to calm things down. Times like these call for a cool head. As the director sits in his chair, you say he's from investigations? Don't they specialize in especially tricky cases? The other officer said, as we stood at the entrance of the building. Yes, the current section chief of investigations is known for being especially sharp. He continues, his name is Myungjung Kim, and he's absolutely ruthless. The other officer says, and I heard that the tax inspector is the one that raided on Senior VP John. The director gets angry as he says, what? That backstabbing dirtbag? Then getting a little calm. Is he out for revenge? Hasn't he done enough already? Still in his calm state, the director says, well, I have to thank you for the new experience, Mr. Park. I've never had to deal with something like this before. Park chokes on his coffee. Oof. Then, Section Chief Kim, the other officer, says, but Director, this might actually work in our favor. He continues, if we work him just right, we can bring him over to our side. Park also takes the chance. That's right, sir. Just leave it to me. I'll work something out. The director looks grim as he says, don't disappoint me this time. Then he says, all right, do it. I was at the subway and about to board when someone saw me. Huh? So he called out, "Excuse me? Aren't you Jaehyun Shin?" Just as the door was opening, a lady came over and said, "It is you. How are you?" I smiled as I recognized her and said, "Ah, Juhui Kim." She smiles back and says, "Wow, what are the chances?" As we take a seat, she says, "So how are things?" I reply in a frank tone, "All right, I guess. What about you?" She replies saying, "Well, I'm still working at the same place." She continues, "Have you found a new job? It looks like you're on your way to work." I reply, smiling, "Actually, yeah." She smiles as she says, "That's great. I was afraid you might have trouble finding work because of how you left." She whispers, "I mean, isn't it hard finding work for someone who leaked internal documents?" I say confused, "Leak internal documents? What do you mean?" Seeing me confused, she says, "Didn't you leak some internal documents to a competitor company?" That's what Mr. Park said. I say in a frank tone, "No way! That's completely absurd." Then she says in a relaxed tone, "So you didn't?" I knew it. She continues, "I didn't think someone so innocent like you could do something like that." I say his name in my mind, Mr. Park. As the doors are closing, she says, "But everyone else at work thinks you really did it." She continues, "Because of your reputation as a whistleblower." I say in my mind, "I see, so that's how they spun it." Then she says, "They've branded you as an example, Jaehyun." Then she gets off at her stop as I head over to meet up with the boys and later reach Tail Enterprises. As I enter the office, one of the staff says, "Hey, isn't that Jaehyun Shin, the traitor?" As we walk by, Clerk Hwang says, "Wow, rough crowd." Then he whispers, "Inspector Shin, why are they all staring at us like that?" Some of them said words like traitor, ungrateful scum, the nerve, while one said, "How dare he show his face here?" As I was walking past them, I told Hwang, "You can ignore them. Let's just do what we came here to do." Just then, another female co-worker says, "Jaehyun, why did he come here?" Just then, Bong and Lee comes over and says, "Well, didn't we meet at a restaurant recently?" Ha ha ha. Then he introduces himself. Bong and Lee, tax accountant. He bends, "This way, please." As we take our seats, Bong and Lee says, Article 18, Executive Bonuses. Executives may receive a bonus of 10% of profits for their exceptional contributions. It's all clearly outlined, right, Inspector? As I take a look at the papers, yes, I see. Then Hwang says, "Have you brought a certified copy of the register and the meeting minutes for the board meeting?" Bong-han Lee hands me a paper and says, "Of course. It took some time because of how busy things are, but it's all there. No issues." As I saw the paper, I said in my mind, it's obvious that they rushed to get this printed out and signed. Bong and Lee continues, "Now, of course, the company did use some of its own funds, and we expect to pay taxes on that." He continues, "We'll be happy to follow the letter of law, but we'd really appreciate it if you met with the director before you left." This got me thinking, are they really trying to bribe me? Hwang says confused. "What? Sir, we're really busy. Isn't that right, Inspector Shin?" But I replied, "Okay, let's go right now then." Hwang looks confused at me. Then Bong and Lee escorts us saying humbly, "This way, gentlemen." As we enter, Manager Park says, "There you are, Jaehyun. It's been ages, hasn't it?" Then Park says, "Meet the director." Bong and Lee, on the other hand, says, "I'll go grab some coffee for everyone." The director says, "No need for pleasantries considering why you are here. But I heard you used to be part of the Teal family. Have yourself a seat." Then he says, "Inspector Jaehyun Shin, right?" Park replies, smiling. "That's right, sir," the director says in a frank tone. "Mr. Park, bring it out. Let's get it over with." Park says as he opens a case full of money, "We regret not giving you proper severance pay before." He continues, "But better late than never, right, Inspector?" Section Chief Kim says, "Or you could think of it as signing bonus for coming back to our team if you'd like." Section Chief Kim says, "In any case, I hope you accept it. It's a show of goodwill." Just then, I raise a pen with a red light. Seeing the red light, Section Chief Kim says, "What is that?" I reply in a frank tone, "I've been recording everything. Perhaps you've forgotten. It was you who fired me, Director." Everyone looks at me shocked as I say in my mind, "It's time I show you what whistleblowing really means." Here, this part ends. If you enjoy this video, like and subscribe.